Ooh, welcome back to Up in the Blue Seats, our New York Rangers podcast from the New York Post. I am the podfather, Jake Brown, alongside Rangers beat writer for the Post, Mollie Walker. The final stretch, Mollie, just a week left of regular season hockey, and then we get into the best time of the year. It's Christmas for Rangers fans, the playoffs, and a likely matchup with the Devils, although things could change a little bit here in the final week. It would take kind of a miracle for it not to. But many people would rather play the Devils than the Hurricanes, I would imagine, and less travel as well. So Larry Brooks will join us later to talk about that. The Filip Chytil contract extension, which in our luck dropped minutes after we dropped the show because death, taxes, and untimely podcast news for us. So that is a tale as old as time. But Mollie, how you doing today?
Pretty good, pretty good. We're manifesting a Rangers Devils series. I don't know if I agree that Ranger fans want Devils in the first round. I think they actually might want Hurricanes, but
Really?
yeah, just because look, I mean, yeah, they split the home and home series with Carolina when they last played them, but that second game was an encouraging sign that, once Carolina falls behind, they're kind of strapped. That's just kind of how they are. And the Rangers have been really good at closing games out lately, which is a trait that is kind of new for them. Once they get that lead in the third period, they're pretty strong at holding on to it. So I do think that fans probably want Carolina in the first round over the Devils, especially after the way the last meeting between the Rangers and Devils went. But me personally rooting for the storylines, obviously. Rangers Devils in the first round would just be absolutely electric.
Listen, you're rooting
And
for a non-flight to
and
Raleigh,
a
North
home
Carolina.
series.
I lived
Yeah.
in that state. I don't blame you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, I don't want to go to Raleigh again at all.
Hearts, you were shaking your head, Andrew Hearts. You are obviously a diehard Ranger fan. You would rather face the Hurricanes, huh?
100%.
Yeah,
And it's only because the Devils and Rangers, it feels like it's I don't know, it's a collision course where both
it
teams
is.
are very, very good. And honestly, I saw how the Rangers played against the Devils this year, most recently a couple weeks ago, or last week. And the Rangers didn't look good, especially when playing from
No.
behind. So if
Yeah.
you're able to get them in a second round where they're a little more tired, and maybe that works to the Rangers' advantage more. Look, I'm in the business of trying to get the Rangers to the next round, and I don't want my team getting completely beat up in the first round. So I would happily take Carolina in the first round. Sorry, Mollie.
No, I think you're right. I think if we are looking at it at who the Rangers want, it's probably Carolina. But we are in the business of rooting for entertainment, and I really think that Rangers Devils series would be electric. It would be fun. The storylines, it would just be absolutely awesome. And yes, I don't have to get on a plane to Raleigh and spend half a week there either. So
Well,
for
listen,
everybody sleeping in their own beds, that's what I'm rooting for.
yeah, that's what everyone wants. Well, the final week it plays out. The Rangers as we enter Wednesday have 5 games. The Devils have 4. The Hurricanes have 5, and the Devils are 3 points behind the Hurricanes. So it takes some Hurricanes losing, the Devils essentially winning out, or close to it. And that would be the situation. All right. Well, we'll have Larry talk about that as well later on, but let's go to our mailbag. We haven't heard from the listeners in a while, so let's go there. We got a couple of questions here, and we got a couple of questions later on for the Hall of Famer as well. We'll start here, Mollie, with Paul Gifford and Richard Ingersoll. Cool name. Is Patrick Kane over the hill, or is he still capable of making a huge impact when playoffs start? It sure looks to me like Kane doesn't have much left. Wow.
Yeah, I understand why that's been generally the consensus in watching Patrick Kane. There's no doubt that he hasn't been playing to his usual self. But I think that's also come with adjusting to a new team, new systems, new atmosphere. And he has said that he's getting more comfortable with every game. But I look at it as these guys, Patrick Kane, Tarasenko, they know that they were brought in here for the playoffs. Can you fault them for not going pedal to the metal in these last games here, especially when there's all the speculation about Kane's hip? Do you blame him for not overexerting himself at this point in the season when these games are pretty much meaningless? Yeah, it's kind of annoying that they weren't able to pull even with the Devils in the last game for a second in the division and potentially go on to secure home ice. But again, in a first round series, it doesn't really matter that much with, going to Newark. It's a 35-minute bus ride down the turnpike. So I don't really think that was of the utmost importance to this team, which is understandable, but also understandable why people would be annoyed at that. But I think that they're gearing up for the playoffs. I think that we're going to see more effort and more of an overexertion once the games actually mean something, because these guys know that they were brought in to further the Rangers along in the playoffs. So I do expect them to tap into a different level once the games actually start meaning something. Even though Patrick Kane isn't playing to, the type of player that we all know he can be, the points are still coming for him. He still has a hand in a lot of plays, even if it's not intentional. And I actually said to him after one of the last games where he scored just a weird fluke goal, which was probably like his third since he's been here. I was like, you've had a couple of these weird goals where you haven't even been trying to put it on net almost, but it's still finding its way into the back of it. Like, is that helping you, come along? And he said that it was, the fact that the points are still there, but he does expect more production from himself. So I expect him to tap more into that in the playoffs.
Well, hopefully he is listening to this show and he will address Paul Gifford and Richard Ingersoll with a couple of goals in the first round of the playoffs and shut him up. And then let's stay on the Kane subject. John Antista and Stephen Palchich want to know what happens with Kane, Tarasenko, and Mikkola at the end of the season. Do we get any of them back?
I don't think so, especially with the Rangers cap situation, and they still got to pay Keandre Miller and Alexis Lafreniere at the end of the season, which I don't anticipate to be very big contracts, especially now that Chytil's out of the way. But just with their current cap situation, there isn't a lot to work with. They would have to cut ties with one or both of them to be able to do something like that. And Tarasenko and Kane would have to take significant pay cuts, which I also don't anticipate happening, because why would it? Mikkola, I actually am curious. I definitely want to ask Larry about this, if he thinks that it's a possibility that they could fit him. I'm not sure. I don't think so either, but I do think that he's been pretty good in his role, especially being thrust into a top 4 role alongside Adam Fox, which he was not supposed to be playing. I think that he has really raised his game and done pretty well under the circumstances, considering the fact that he was not brought in to play alongside a guy like Adam Fox and drawing those top type of matchups. I like his game a lot, aside from the penalties, which he has cut down significantly since the beginning. But I wonder if that is a possibility. I wonder if that is something they'll explore. So I guess we'll see. But as far as Tarasenko and Kane, I don't anticipate that being a possibility for the Rangers.
I wish the NHL changed their salary cap situation. I hate that a team, especially in New York,
you and everybody else
is broke. Like, they should be rich. You have to GoFundMe for the NHL. What the hell's going on here?
Well, if you look at the viewership numbers, if just like the NCAA tournament for men's and women's basketball, they just blow the NHL out of the water, unfortunately. So you got to put that into perspective in terms of the money that they're generating. So, but it sucks. I'm in agreement with you. It does.
Well, Molly, let me not do one of these in front of your face. I don't want to stir controversy on the internet and break the internet. Let people celebrate. Let people talk their damn trash, for God's sake. It's part of the sport. Everyone should be doing it. Doesn't matter what team, who you are. Let them talk their goddamn trash. All right, Here we go. Let's keep questions going. Tom Arnold is a listener of the program. He wants to know, what cap space will the Rangers have after the playoffs, and what are they going after? I guess you can't answer what they're going after, but yeah.
Kind of a little bit of, I can touch on a little bit of both. Well, obviously the cap space is gonna depend on how the Miller and Lafreniere contracts turn out, anticipating that both of them are getting contracts. And then after that, if you think about it, especially since Tarasenko and Kane are on their way out, they're back at square one when it comes to looking for top 6 right wingers. So that's another problem, but they do have Jimmy Vesey. They extended him, obviously, and Barclay Goodrow, although I'm not sure how much longer his tenure is on the line, considering the Rangers situation. But they do have these guys who I know a lot of fans aren't a fan of them being in the top 6, but they are solid fillers for top 6 roles in the time being, depending on what what they can afford in the offseason. If they can only afford bottom 6 players, then I would expect those guys to move up. But that's kind of the crazy thing, is that they are right back at square one, needing 2 top 6 right wingers. Larry and I have talked about it on the show many times about how we've thought that they should take guys like, even though Will Cooley is not a top 6 guy, but start moving guys over to the right. There is an overload on the left. It is just so deep, and they need right wing guys. So that's probably the tippy top of Chris Drury's list going into the offseason.
All right, a couple of minutes left. Let's run through these quick. Robert Hanley and Christopher Garvey want to know, does the cap reset for the playoffs at all? And are we then allowed to bring up a spare forward to carry, or do we have to wait for an injury? Who do you see being the taxi squad for the playoffs? Harper for sure, Hayek, Jones, Brzezinski, and Will Cooley.
Well, the cap doesn't exist in the playoffs, so they could pull up whoever they want for any amount of money, and create a little bit of a taxi squad, just like it was mentioned. I also would anticipate a guy like Carpenter to be thrown into that mix, maybe Matthew Robertson. We'll see, but they should have, all those guys that were mentioned should definitely be brought up. But yeah, there is no salary cap in the playoffs, which is kind of a unique thing to the NHL. So that'll be fun.
No cap ever. Ban the
No
cap ever all year. No cap. Oh, look at that. That's your kids' language back in the day. John Logan wants to know, I wish they would give Adam Fox a game off. Can you ask why they don't?
Well, I can tell you why they don't, and when they might be able to. Ryan Lindgren is supposed to play tonight against the Lightning, so he's going to be back. So that brings Ben Harper back as a scratch. So I think that now that they have one defenseman in the wings, I would expect, as we get closer to the end of the regular season, maybe it will be on a rotation basis. One day Jacob Trouba will get the night off, one night Adam Fox will get the night off, something of that variation. So, but I only expect it to be a game or so. Someone like Adam Fox, I feel like all we do is talk about his workload. Every single time I've talked to that man about his workload, it does not faze him. That's all he's known since he's been in the NHL. And I think about it too. I've thought about how they've run this D core into the ground, especially during the whole Patrick Kane sweepstakes. And that might be a factor down the line. It might not. But all I know is that those guys are used to that kind of workload. And Adam Fox, sometimes it doesn't even look like he breaks a sweat. So I don't really think that it affects it as much as we think it does. But yeah, that's how I expect it to go. He'll probably get a game off in the last 2 or 3 games of the regular season.
And as Larry said last week, these guys don't like taking games off. They want to try and play all 82. Joe Galea wants to know, I see many of your interviews on YouTube with the coaches and players. I would love to hear from Chris Drury monthly. Is it uncommon for GMs to meet with the press on a regular basis?
It's not uncommon. I think every team does their own thing, which is something that I'm trying to work on with the league in the off season. I do think that there should be some uniformity, and that, it should be written in our media regulations that every GM should have to speak a minimum of however many times a season. We did, the last time we spoke to him was the trade deadline. So that's a big, he has to, it sucks when some GMs don't speak at that. I know Lou Lamoriello didn't speak, but that's because he didn't make any moves on actual trade deadline day. So every team, it's that team by team discretion, but it's not uncommon. But I think it's depending on how the GM likes to run things. And I know Chris Drury is a little bit more reserved in that aspect, but that's okay. We speak to him. We spoke to him on the major occasions, but I am in agreement that I think that every GM should be held to a minimum amount of times that they have to speak to the media, just for transparency and around the big events that happen along the course of a season.
All right, last one before Brooksy comes on from Michael Docs. After being with the team for a bit, what are 88's impressions on some of the Ranger stars, Zibanejad, Fox, etc.? What about playing an MSG and Ranger fans' presence at road games in general? What has he discovered over these few weeks with the Rangers that he wasn't aware of from the outside?
Well, playing at MSG is something he's obviously known about, and that was something that right off the bat he said that he was super excited to do. And he talked about how he felt like home ice advantage really meant something to the Rangers because of how great of a place MSG is to play in. So I think that he's really enjoyed that aspect. I mean, the guy's nickname is Showtime, for crying out loud. I mean, he was built to play under the big lights of Madison Square Garden, I think. I also have been so impressed by how impressed he is with the kid line, with Alexis Lafreniere, Filip Chytil, and Capo Caco. The things that he's said about them are so nice. And I could only imagine what it must be like for those three to read some of the things that he's said about them. And on top of it, I mean, I've talked about how he's the, reputation that he had is that he's a hockey nerd, he's a hockey nut. And I was talking to him about Alexis Lafreniere and the pressures of facing, first overall pick pressure and expectations, because he is a former first overall pick as well. And this guy was just spitting out a full-on scouting report on Alexis Lafreniere from when he was in juniors. I'm like, how do you know that? I'm like, you were like a cup deep in your career when Alexis Lafreniere was in juniors. And he's telling me he was a playmaker. He was a shooter. He's giving me all these things about what he was like in junior. I'm like, how did you know that? Were you watching the kid? So I just think that was also a really cool thing. The fact that he knows so much about, his hockey history and the people that are in the league right now, how he's kept up with careers and things like that. And I think that says a lot about Patrick Kane. So that's something I've been impressed with. And that's something he's also been impressed with. He loves the way that the kids play. So you got to love that.
Hockey historian Patrick Kane, as
Yeah.
well as Hall of Famer as well. All right, Hartz. I think Andrew Hartz says he has a mailbag question as well. What do you got, Hartz?
I do, and this is actually for both of you guys. So feel free to jump in and answer, whoever wants to go first. The New York Rangers, obviously a lot of great players, a lot of fun players, people on and off the ice. If you could have dinner with any current or past player, who would it be and why?
Molly?
I'd probably have to go with Henrik Lundqvist, just because, for so many reasons, but mostly because I would really like to hear about, just from a first person account, about everything that happened at the end of his career. And I got to cover him a little bit at the end of his career, which was a really interesting thing for me after growing up and watching his career unfold and just catching the tail end of it, and how kind of sad it was. And then everything that happened when he was in Washington with his heart and having to be forced to retire. And then making the transition to the media side of things. So I think that would be really fun. And because we're now both on the same side, it'd be a lot of fun to pick his brain about certain things. So Henrik Lundqvist for me, probably.
I would have said Henrik too, because not really for any of those reasons, for the fact that he's the most recognizable person.
Yeah.
Ranger, because a lot of hockey players, like, not everyone's going to recognize Adam Graves or
Right.
Mark Messier maybe, but everyone,
Mark Messier definitely. If you're a hockey fan.
But like younger people, like current and past, they will all see Henrik. So like being around him would be cool. Like at a steakhouse, and it's like, who's that? Average looking bald guy with Henrik Lundqvist. I got to know who that guy is. He's got to be pretty important.
Yeah.
So I'd be important by
guy.
association being around Henrik Lundqvist. So got to go with them. And when I, talked to him at a charity hockey game, and he's just so good looking. And I came with a blazer, like looking fly, and he still looked better. And I was like, the best thing I have in my wardrobe. I can't up my game, Henrik. You got to calm down. This is him in a charity game coaching.
Seriously.
I'm like, you're not at a steakhouse. Why do you got to look this good?
He could show up in a paper bag and still be the best looking person in the room. Let's be real.
Yeah. He's he probably got a great cologne too. So we relate on that, with great cologne and a good smell. Anyways, a guy who has a great cologne is Larry Brooks, our Hall of Famer, and he'll join us on Up in the Blue Seats. All right, we're back up in the Blue Seats. Jake Brown, Mollie Walker with the great Larry Brooks. Follow him on Twitter at NYP_Brooksy. Of course, Larry, right after we dropped last week's episode, the Rangers signed Filip Chytil to a new contract of 4 years, $17.75 million. Let's get your thoughts. What do you think of the deal?
I thought it was a great deal for both sides, a win-win. Filip is developing every day. He's becoming a leader. He's an essential part of not only the present, but the future for the Rangers. So it was a really good number for them. A very good number, obviously, for Filip. So this was a good piece of business done by Chris Drury.
He strikes me as someone that is going to be so empowered by getting this deal done now, going into the playoffs. As much as they always say that it's not on their mind, blah, 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 they're not thinking about that they have to sign a new contract at the end of the season. It definitely does. There's just no way. And I feel like now that he's gotten that vote of confidence, they want him here. They consider him an integral part of the future in New York. I feel like he is someone that's just going to benefit from this so much in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with you. I think it's also interesting the timing of the announcement, and the timing of negotiations, because it's fairly unusual for negotiations to be going on this late in the season, because players talk a lot about I don't want to be distracted. I just want to focus on the playoff, the season, the playoffs, and then we'll take care of business in the off season. So this probably was an amicable negotiation. Both sides obviously wanted the same thing, but I think it's I think you're right. I think that Filip has become more empowered week by week, month by month. His play, his demeanor in the room. He's one of their leaders. He is. And so I agree. I think this will elevate him.
All right, we've got some mailbag questions here, 4 of them. So let's just rattle them off. We got one from Patrick O'Neill. What top 6 line combination have you guys preferred? It seems to me that Patrick Kane has done his best work with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider.
Actually, they haven't played all that much together. I think that's probably the combination that has the most chance to succeed with Kane. Tarasenko has fit with everybody.
Yeah,
Tarasenko has fit with Zibanejad. He's fit with Trocheck. So I don't think there's an issue here. It's trying to find the best fit for Kane. But it's also trying to. Kane needs to be better. I don't know that every time a player, and this doesn't only apply to Kane, who's only been here for a few weeks, but during the season we would talk about guys and how there were so many changes in the lines, but it's about on the individual to play better. Kane just needs to elevate his game. I'm not sure what's going on. I think he was deferential the first couple of weeks. The time for that has passed. I think he needs to make a mark. So we'll see. I mean, again, I think the top 6 combinations are less important than how each individual plays. I don't think it matters if Chris Kreider plays with Trocheck or plays with Zibanejad. If he's on his game, he's going to bring whatever he brings, and if he's not on his game, it doesn't matter who he's playing with. So I think we've done this all year, focused on the combinations, and probably to an extreme, because it's about individual play.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I do, as someone who was on the split Artemi Panarin and Vincent Trocheck train very early on in the season, I have come off of that. And I do think Panarin should be back with Trocheck. And I do think Kreider is at his most comfortable next to Zibanejad. So I do think that that's probably, the top, at least on the left side.
Right. I think you've got 2-man combinations again.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because Gallant on Tuesday was asked, I think, about Trocheck, and he said that he thought Trocheck was focusing too much on trying to prove himself offensively the first half of the year, and now he's gotten back to his game. His defense has led to his offense. The interesting thing for me is, for a year and a half, we were talking about bringing Kane over so he could play with Panarin.
Right.
And that ended after what 3 or 4 games. They've never gone back to it. So that's listen, there are 5 games left, including the Tampa game. I don't think very much. I don't think we're going to learn very much over the last week and a half of the season. I think that, the Rangers just want to stay somewhat sharp, want to avoid injuries, but I would also be curious to get another look at Kane and Panarin together, even if it doesn't, even if they're not planning on it in the playoffs. Because listen, any team that makes a run is going to need reinforcements. That there are going to be changes in the lineup. There are. So it's just funny that the motivating force for bringing Kane here was so he could reunite with Panarin, right?
Right. And now he's not even playing with him.
recreate the magic. And Kane, the first day said, listen, it may take some time.
He did say that. It was like a warning. It was like a PSA. The way he said that, I thought that also my antennas went up there. He made such a point to be like, guys,
right.
It's going to probably take a lot longer, than you guys think it will.
Right. and they didn't have the runway, so it was over after 3 or 4 games, and gone to a number of different combinations. But I wouldn't mind seeing that, at least one more time, and just to see just how it looks. But again, I don't think we're going to learn an awful lot over the final week.
All right, on to the next one. Jeff Corsello, are the days of certain hockey fans calling Alexis Lafreniere a bust now officially over? Some quote-unquote experts are still saying he is in danger of being traded because of the Rangers' cap crunch. Can we now put this to bed and tell us what you think this next contract will look like?
I don't know what his next contract is going to look like. I just don't. And one of the reasons is because his agency doesn't have a real track record.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can learn things from, you learn from the past, and you see how certain agents have conducted negotiations on their clients' behalfs. And, some guys look to make a deal. Other guys are going to squeeze you for every nickel. I'm not sure. It's going to be, I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. I don't think the Rangers want to trade Alexis Lafreniere. Honestly,
yeah, I don't either.
I don't think the agenda is to create cap space by trading Lafreniere. I think the agenda is to save cap space by bridging Lafreniere on a 2-year deal. But you have to have 2 partners willing to sign that contract too.
Right.
And I just don't know. You kind of, the Rangers have a good thing going. Whether they advance past the first round this year, or whether they win the cup this year, they've built a pretty good foundation here. They're going to be a pretty good team for a while, I think. And Lafreniere is going to be a part of it. So if he wants to stay, and
of course,
there are so few offer sheets that probably confuses the issue. But if a player wants to leave, he can always get an offer sheet. My hope, as a for Ranger fans, is that Lafreniere wants to stay. There's no indication that he doesn't, but it's not going to be easy, because the numbers are the numbers. There are
the space is the space.
The space is the space. So we'll see. But I certainly don't think the Rangers are Chris Drury's looking at it and saying, yeah, Lafreniere is the guy, we're going to trade. I think they want him. I think they see, and we don't know. I mean, it's so early in Lafreniere's career, and even goes, and still Phillips. Will the Rangers be better, down the line if they split them? This is always, or have they just established themselves now as this dynamic
unit
that is better together than apart? Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot, but no, I'm sure there are some fans who will continue to call him a bust if he has a bad playoff. So that's just part of it. I don't think he cares too much about that. So you know, he's a popular guy in the room, very popular. You know, I think they're gonna do their best to sign him to a deal that they can afford.
So you kind of answered this next one from David Schwalb. Could Alexis Lafreniere be the salary cap victim, especially with Brennan Ohtmann waiting in the wings? And is Brennan Ohtmann NHL ready? So you can just kind of focus on the back half of that.
You know, I don't know if he's NHL ready. There aren't that many 19 and 20-year-olds who are. I don't listen. He's had a couple of impressive training camps.
Yeah.
I thought actually his first one was a little more impressive, or am I mixing that? No, I'm thinking.
No, I was about to say,
I'm sorry. He's had a couple of very impressive training camps. And
Brennan was great at this last training camp. He was. I think we both voted for him for whatever that award is for the best rookie. Yeah,
you're right. I don't know. Again, it's a lot to ask. You know, it's a lot to ask a kid to come right out of junior and play. I don't know that it would be necessarily harmful to his development to start next year in Hartford, but you know, we're talking about, you know, a summer for him to get bigger but the bottom line answer is I don't think the Rangers are going to move Lafreniere to make room for Ohtmann. I don't think that's the idea. The idea is to have them both in their top six when Kreider's contract expires, when Panarin's contract expires. They're gonna need a couple of top six wingers, right? So I think the plan is they see it as Lafreniere Ohtmann someday replacing Panarin Kreider.
Oh, that also answered my second one from Christopher Walkley. Where/when do you see Brennan Ohtmann fitting into the lineup? So, but I did mention earlier how we were talking about how they need to start moving guys over to the right side because they are thin over there.
Yeah. It's like a team coming up with 5 first basemen. You can't play them all. I mean, you can DH one, but it's like in the old days. Everything's the old days.
The olden times. Shut up.
No, but it's true. I mean, I would revel in that. I would. I mean, but there were these times in baseball where, like, the San Francisco Giants had Willie McCovey and Orlando Cepeda. They both played first base. They tried to play them in the outfield. It didn't work, so they wound up trading Cepeda. And this happens where teams just stack players at positions. The Rangers, don't need 5 top 6 left wings. It doesn't work.
And
so
that's what they have.
And again, I thought that they should have had Ohtmann on the right side during this last training camp, because I think that's where he's probably going to need to play. At least when he breaks in. I think maybe not.
Larry talking my language, talking baseball here on Up in the Blue Seats. You can hear that on Amazing But True with me and Nelson Figueroa if you're a Mets fan. Last one, Larry, we debated this earlier. If you're a Ranger fan, would you rather play the Devils or play the Hurricanes in the first round?
I think the better matchup right now is Carolina. I think Carolina's still searching for the way to move forward without Svechnikov. It's just a huge loss for them. They don't score a lot
in terms of scoring.
They just don't score a lot now. And I think the Rangers can outscore Carolina. We know that there's going to be puck pressure from start to finish. But the Rangers have played a lot against Carolina the last 2 years. I think they played 15 games. They've won 8 of them. It's 8-7. The Devils have just so much firepower, and it looks to me like they're just, they're playing with house money. They are loose. They're having fun. They're exuberant. I don't think that's going to change when the playoffs start. There's a different gravity to it, but I don't think any of this is going to bother New Jersey. And I think, for the fans, I think a Rangers Devils series is, we've kind of been looking at it for a month or 2 months. And I think it would just be fantastic for
For those who aren't watching on YouTube, I'm just, we are rooting to be in Newark for
There's no rooting in the
first
press
round.
box, Molly. Come on.
We
What
are
is it?
rooting for the storylines. We're rooting for what
Yeah.
media roots for. We're rooting for
Yeah.
everyone to be sleeping in their own bed. The storylines. It's great for the area. It's great for the tri-state area. That's just
Great for Molly. It's great for Molly.
It's great for Molly.
It's not great for Raleigh International Airport, who is getting no love here on this program.
But I think the Rangers might have might line up better against Carolina at this point. But I'm hoping, like Molly.
But Larry's also rooting for Newark.
Yeah. Battle of the Hudson. Battle of the Hudson.
Battle of the Hudson.
We'll see how the final week plays out. Larry Brooks, we'll talk to you for the playoffs. Thanks for coming
All
on.
right. Sounds good. Thanks.
All righty. Everyone's rooting for the local matchup. What a shocker here on Up in the Blue Seats. That wraps up episode 120 of Up in the Blue Seats, our Rangers podcast from the New York Post. Thanks to Andrew Hartz and the intern Josh Crawford for producing the show. Thanks to Larry Brooks, as always, for bringing his insight. Make sure you watch us on the New York Post Sports YouTube page. Find that Up in the Blue Seats playlist. Give us that thumbs up, comment below. We appreciate your support. And if you're a listener and don't want to watch us and think we're ugly people, you can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, wherever you get your podcast. Well, Molly, you are not an ugly person. I might be, but I won't put that on you.
Shut up, Jake.
You're flying to St. Louis. This has been a long journey for you. This is lots of travel, little days off. And now the grind of playoff hockey begins. I mean, this has got to be cool, though. Like, to cover a potential championship contender early on in your career. They went on a fun run last year, but, the hope is that they go to the actual Stanley Cup Finals this year. As a young reporter, this has got to be fun, despite all the stress that it brings you, me, and Andrew Hartz.
I feel a lot more equipped for this upcoming playoffs. It was my first length. I mean, I covered the Islanders for both their conference final runs, but one was obviously remote during during COVID. And then the other one only got out there in the conference final. So this last season was the first time that I did it really from start to finish. All 3 rounds were places that we had to fly to. So I just feel like I wasn't mentally or physically prepared last season, but I am this season. I feel like I know what to expect. I remember Larry and I were talking about it last season that we wrote 50 days in a row for the last playoff run, which is, it's a lot. It's a lot of words, a lot of days in a row, just no time to not be writing about the New York Rangers. So it's a lot, but it's so exciting. You're right. I mean, the fact that I've already covered 3 conference finals is kind of crazy to me. Guess it just was the right time to be working in, hockey media in the tri-state area. So I consider myself to be very lucky, because I do know that this doesn't always happen, sometimes ever, in people's careers. So very exciting.
I mean, you could be in like Buffalo with your girl. Who was your girl with? Rachel.
Rachel.
Up
Buffalo's
there.
up and coming, though. Buffalo is on its way, I think. It is.
Yeah,
Tage Thompson is the real deal. This kid, Devin Levi, oh my God, he was unbelievable the other night. So Buffalo's the team to watch, I think.
I guess I can't talk. They did beat the Rangers, so
Yeah.
not a good time to mention them. Who has been your favorite celebrity sighting at the Garden this year? There's been a lot of good
ones.
ones.
There have been a lot of good ones. I always love when the marvelous Mrs. Maisel comes on. I'm a big fan of the show, and I think she's adorable. Alex Earl was in the stands the other day. That was crazy. A lot of people didn't know who she is. She's a very famous TikToker. Anybody that's probably 25 and under just relates to her way more than we probably should. So that was fun too.
I liked Jamie Tart.
Yeah,
I still need to watch the new season.
Yeah, you do. It's so good.
I just hate the TV that asks me to log in and I forget the password. I'm like, can't you just stay logged in? So I got to remember my Apple log
You
in
actually
plane.
reminded me. I'm totally gonna watch that before I go on the plane later.
You can
Thank
watch it
you.
on the plane, right? Can't you just download? You cover the New York Post Wi-Fi service.
I don't. I'm not sure if you could watch from all the apps. The only one that I watch from is Netflix, but I'm definitely gonna watch that first.
Yeah, I need to get on that too. So hopefully by next week's final regular season episode, we'll be through season. What is it? Season 2, season 3, right? Season 3 of Ted Lasso. For Mollie Walker, Larry Brooks, Andrew Hartz, I'm Jake Brown. We'll be back for a final regular season episode next week as we get you ready for the playoffs. And it's all right here on Up in the Blue Seats. Enjoy the final 5 games, everybody.